Oh boy, where do we even begin with this football team? Welcome everybody to the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I am Anthony, he is John, and the Bengals, I don't even know what you want to call it, sleepwalk through the game on Sunday, it felt like, and I don't know. The energy is out of this team. The results are not there on the field, and then there's more chatter about the team, obviously, and its practices. Again, I'm Anthony. He is John. John, ready to vent, buddy?
I didn't know the Bengals played yesterday. How many points did this? all I did was shovel around my car. I shoveled snow and ice.
Did you?
Yeah, at least
Look
someone did.
Look at you. I was gonna say you're looking burly. You got the snow shoveling muscles working in action there, buddy. This show, of course, is brought to you by America's #1 sports book, FanDuel. I'm sure there's some maybe some people put some money on this game and didn't expect the Bengals to, as you alluded to, lay a total goose egg of a performance in this one. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what may be next for the Cincinnati Bengals, what needs to change, and all of the things surrounding that led up to this game and the aftermath of the game. And this is our aftermath episode, so that's appropriate. But we are also presented by the fans only company FOCO, and the links to both of our sponsors are in the show descriptions wherever you may be watching us via a variety of different potential video streaming platforms, and or it'll be in the show description as well if you like the audio side of things. And of course, the channel Believe in Cincy and the Believe Podcast Network is where we can be found. So go check it out how you can. And we appreciate, of course, the support of our sponsors and all of our listeners that routinely check out our show. We appreciate all of you. John, I like you said, it felt like this team really didn't even, with the exception of a couple players and some promising young defensive players had some nice moments in this game as well. But it felt overall like this team looked like a team that just was either not prepared to play, did not want to be there. I know it was frigid, more on that later too with the team and that aspect. I know it was frigid, but this was a gotta have it game. This is a look, our playoff chances are minuscule. We just beat this team on their turf soundly a couple of weeks ago. And you would think that would be the mindset of the team. And when I say we, I don't use that like we as I say that like, taking on the mindset of the Bengals. And you just felt like, big rivalry game. Whatever team loses is going to have real problems with their playoff chances or be fully eliminated, as we saw the Bengals, what happened with them. But it felt like there was no urgency. The energy level was not there. And I unfortunately, I kind of knew the direction that this game was going to head into when there was that chase drop that was an easy 6 at the beginning of the game. And you can say, yeah, the pass was off. It just felt like, yeah, it's going to be one of those games where they don't capitalize on opportunities. That was the case. couple of nice moments, like I said, from some defensive young players, Miles Murphy, Demetrius Knight. They finally decided to use a spy, so that was fun. I don't know. It's not so much that they lost, it's in the way that they lost for me. I just felt like they looked like a team that did not want to be on the field.
I mean, they look like they were already eliminated from the playoffs. I
Yep.
think I don't love going down this path because I think a lot of players in general embody the just 1 week at a time, every week it's its own thing. It really did feel like what happened last week at the end of the Bills game carried over into this one, where that loss in Buffalo didn't eliminate them from the playoffs, but it, I think, took 99% of the wind out from underneath their sails.
Yep.
And the way that they beat Baltimore initially, obviously, 5 turnovers.
Yep.
It's aberration, right? But the defense still played well in that game. I think defense still came up to show itself a little bit this one and gave them a chance. Obviously, it was after the quarter, right? But this team lives and dies with its leaders on offense, and it just kind of makes the whole engine go. And when Joe Burrow is not playing anywhere near where he should be, it really does impact the rest of the team. And obviously, you can't have a worse offensive performance than putting up 0 points and multiple turnovers. Like, you can get even worse in terms of more turnovers, but like you like there's just nothing to say about what the offense did. Like, they just didn't show up to play. They were just completely lifeless out there, and it represented the whole team in a way that is a little bit unfair to, like you said, some members of the defense that are continuing to take steps forward. And I think that's the one semi-positive that the team can look at right now is with how the defense, in some very marginal ways, is making progress despite the overall terribleness of the unit. But the whole point of Joe Burrow coming back in these final handful of weeks in this playoff, desperate playoff push, is that he plays like himself, like he normally does at this part of the year. And if he doesn't, not just if he doesn't do that, if he's playing legitimately terrible, then there's no chance that the Bengals have. And it sucks because obviously the team had pretty good quarterback play when he was out for a handful of weeks with Joe Flacco, and they didn't have a chance then because the defense is terrible. It's why there was like a handful of questions after the game about how for 15 weeks now the team has not been able to have consistency in terms of its offense and defense playing well at the same time. And that's just the sign of what Burrow said: a bad football team. They haven't been a good football team this year. That's why you're 4-10. It doesn't matter if your quarterback has missed half the year. Everything around him is also not very good. And I think that's the one. I mean, I'll get to that point later, but just with the specifics of this game, they were just lifeless, and it looked like that from the beginning, and it looked like that at the end too.
It did, and unfortunately, there are a lot of reasons for that. The one thing that stuck out to me too, and it's of no fault of his own, but the fact that he didn't play in either Baltimore game this year. I believe his rookie year, he missed the finale. He left early in the finale. That also hurt the team. And then, he 21, he played in 20. There are a number of games where Higgins has missed in this important rivalry. And obviously it's now lopsided in the Burrow era, the Ravens and Bengals. And so again, no fault of his own. The fact that he kept playing in the Buffalo game in itself is like, a small miracle, but it goes back to, and I forget who it was that put this out there, but basically you're looking at somewhere between, and I think this was mentioned on I do want to give a tip of the cap to the Bengals and Brews podcast. I think this was mentioned earlier today by them, but you're looking at 30 to 40% of the time that your 3 stars are on the field at the same time or available at the same time at any given point. And when you rely that heavily on those 3, like you said, that's the engine that makes it go. When you rely that heavily on those 3 and you're only getting those 3 on the field a third of the time, that kills you. It kills you. And it also speaks to, like you said, the lack of building a competent team around those 3. So again, it was Burrow did not play well, and to me, of course, all we talked about it on one of our last shows, John, where the comments he made preceding this game about where's the talking about the fun of it, the fun of playing, the fun of it, and then you go out there and this team looked lifeless. There's a lot of errors and uncharacteristic stuff, like I mentioned that Chase. I mean, it was a little tiny bit behind him, but we've seen him make way more ridiculous catches, and then he would have been gone for 6. There was the other interception. Initially looked like Burrow sailed it. It was high, but it also looked like Chase mistimed his jump. It looks like they're not really fully in sync, which sounds weird because I think Chase had 140 yards, 150 yards in this game, all said and done. But it's a shame what we're witnessing with these star players, be it injuries, be it not on the field at the same time. And when they still are not capitalizing on championship aspirations. So I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a mini rant, a mini vent, but a lot of things and we could dive into the film. We could dive into all kinds of different stuff with this. To me, and we kind of said this briefly before we took the air. It's not so much about that. It's just the energy or lack thereof around this team, this aura or lack thereof around this team that existed just a couple of years ago. And it has seemingly just been zapped out of this team.
I think collectively people expected what happened last year to be kind of replicated now that Burrow was back and that they could just reel off win after win after win after win when your backs are up against the wall. That's a reputation that the team kind of established itself even in their good seasons. Like it hasn't always been completely easy roads to get to the playoffs, and they were just able to win the games that they needed to win at this point in the season. And I think that contrast that we're now kind of experiencing based off of what we've seen in the last 5 years compared to what we're seeing now. Obviously, the team is not perfect. Not having T. Higgins or Trey Hendrickson is not ideal. Every team in the NFL is hurt right now, like especially this year where stars are going down left and right. No one is in an ideal situation to play their absolute best. You need to be better than what you were on Sunday. It's just inexcusable. And it speaks to not just the players being bad, it speaks to them not being mentally prepared. It speaks to the leaders of this team not pushing the right buttons. It speaks to coaching not being where it needs to be. It speaks to everything. And that's why, when talking about and speculating what Burrow was talking about, and he cleared the air and said that it has nothing to do with necessarily the organization, it has everything to do with his personal mindset coming back from a third injury in 6 years and everything that comes with that. I just refuse to think that there aren't at least other factors kind of at least trickling into his mind a little bit, because he himself, man, like it was third down on one play. He was scrambling out of the pocket. He threw it away. I've never seen Joe Burrow give up on a third down. Never once. Like that. And this was like in the second quarter. He was phoning it in. And I don't necessarily blame him, obviously, because of everything that's happened and everything that he's gone through this year just to come back to a crappy football team. But like that, again, it's just it was the symbol of the day when the guy that did everything in his power to come back yet again in an advanced time period in terms of just overcoming a major injury, for him to just be like, yeah, this is just I'm not this, I don't have it today, and I can't push through it. Like it's just you're done. The energy in that building is completely zapped at this point, and I think with whatever is going on in Burrow's mind right now, I refuse to believe that everything about it is just like his own personal injury and personal recovery and everything like that. I think in general, just the lack of help and support around him, it at least plays a little bit into that. And even if he doesn't even realize it, it's definitely weighing on him at least a little bit.
Yeah. And and unfortunately too, kind of like what you said, when your leader, your quarterback, your Superman is number one, not playing well on the field, but again, kind of going into this game, not the best vibes, just not the best vibes. He's questioning things, and it in a way, it was surprising to me to see that kind of performance, but in another way, it was not, just based on all the things that were said beforehand. Obviously, like you said, that again, the way that they lost and not putting up much of a fight. There was some, there were some nice moments early. There were some opportunities early, but you also have to, I mean, Zach Taylor, whatever your thoughts on him at this moment, his job is to have this team play very sound, good football, win or lose, in a absolutely gotta have it scenario. And they epically failed. They epically failed. And it was their quarterback didn't play well. To me, too, I mean, I know this looks with the shutout and everything, to me, this wasn't a game that was out of reach or anything like that. Like this was a game that they still could have, scratched and clawed their way back to making it a close game, making it uneasy against the image that will last to me in this game, John, was the second interception and the whole backyard. I'm gonna here. You take it to that. I'm not gonna run it back. You can take it. And of course, inevitably, it went to the house. But that's the difference in the way these two teams are playing football right now. One team still having fun, fighting and going after it, and another team just seemingly laid down. And that, to me, when that kind of play happens on your home turf, that image, that, I mean, it's, I understand why the Ravens did that. I understand why that player, he's probably like, I'm not going to score this one. You take it. But it's disrespectful. It is. It's just like, hey, it's just a kick in the teeth.
I mean, the play in general was very, very rare to see because Burrow lost his footing and he tried to throw off his back foot and he threw it to no one except the Ravens linebacker, who then, like you said, handed it off to the safety. He was just going to be faster.
Gilman, yeah.
There are other moments like that too, where it's like we've kind of seen this game before a little bit, in which the Bengals offense was relying on just 4 yards in a cloud of dust through the air somehow. Like this team has the fewest explosive plays in the last 4 years for a reason. So they have to sustain these long, methodical drives, and one sack or one holding penalty can completely ruin it, or just one bad mistake from the quarterback. That's why they didn't have any points in this game. They were able to move the ball with some success, and they possessed the ball for 40 freaking minutes with no points, which is like the first time in the last 40 something years that ever happened. So we've seen them against this Ravens defense look like that, in which they weren't able to capitalize off drives or create explosive plays. Whereas the Ravens, for as promising as the Bengals defense looked in some moments, Myles Murphy obviously winning as a pass rusher, Demetrius Knight actually making plays in the backfield for once, Jordan Battle continuing to find the ball. There was promise on defense, but that's the difference in terms of the Ravens offense, their ability to find those explosive plays in which they can put up points without even holding the ball for very long periods of time. They're able to find soft spots down the field, and Lamar Jackson can still put the ball where he wants to most of the time. So that was the difference in why the Ravens were able to put up points despite only possessing the ball for 20 minutes. And for as good as the Bengals defense played, there are still moments in which they sent out an all-out blitz on a screen pass, and then the image that I'm thinking of is when I think it may have been Keaton Mitchell, it may have been Ali, the third string running back. He catches the ball and is at the line of scrimmage. The closest Bengals defender is literally on the ground on his butt because he tripped. He was the closest player to the ball, and no one came even close to tackling him. So for as good and sporadic as the Bengals defense was, it just still obviously wasn't enough. And the fact that the offense looked completely the opposite, in which there weren't any positive moments out there, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and the complementary football thing, that's what's been lacking with this team over the last couple of seasons now. I don't normally like to, give highlights to this, but hey, we do have a Ravens person in the chat saying LFG Ravens, I'm drinking Bengals tears today.
Us off?
I don't know why he's flipping us off. That's next. I didn't see the flip off emoji until now that goes away. I'm not doing that. But hey, revel in the win. I'm going to say this, John, and we're going to transition here in just a second, but I'm going to say this, and there's all kinds of mottos or, adages about effort and apathy and basically when a team is, and I don't want to speak for everybody in that locker room or whatever. But I saw apathy yesterday. That's what I saw, and that is a bad place to be as a football team, whether it's a business, an organization, anything. When you are apathetic about what you're supposed to be doing, that's a dangerous place to be, and that's what it felt like yesterday. I don't know if anyone else echoes that or not, but that's what I felt.
100%. I mean, that's the position that you don't want to be in when your team is bad. You want there to still be belief in that this operation works. And that's another contrast, I think, right now, because this is going to be at least the third worst season in the Zach Taylor era. Obviously, the worst two were the first two. But in those first two, it was obviously one of them was his first year, and like there was still belief that he could get better. And the second year, he finished the year strong and had some signature wins to his resume. And there was a growing belief that the culture here was being laid, the foundation was being laid down, and like there was progress and promise to be had in the future. At this point now, though, it's year 7, and again, like the majority of the guys that you need out there are out there, and there's just no belief in this operation anymore. We have people in the comments right now talking about like what Burrow's talking about in terms of like Burrow saying that it's on the players to play better, and it makes sense why he says that publicly because he is a player and he's a very accountable person, and he himself has always been a person of his word, and he's able to kind of put his words to actions. If the players themselves need to play better, like that is also a pretty strong indictment about who's putting the players out there and who's bringing the players in the building in the first place. And I think that there's been at least some belief for a while, even going back to last year, that the people making these decisions aren't necessarily making the best ones. And that's what's leading to the locker room that you see now and the players around the field now. And I think just in general, there's a disbelief that the entire process here is going in the right direction. It goes beyond just how players are treated in terms of contract extensions. It goes beyond, the F grades that the team continues to get in the NFLPA report cards. It's like everything, and everything's building up to just a team that's just falling flat when it absolutely cannot, despite the fact that you have two of the most valuable assets at your disposal in Burrow and Chase. And when they're playing, like you said, in a very apathetic way, it's just there's nothing that the other 51 players on that team can do to bring everyone up.
Yep. Thank you, Les, for your comment. Especially your last sentence there. Appreciate you being a longtime listener. We do have a major super chat from a very familiar, generous person. We are going to hold off on that for just 1 second because that's going to be our final segment. But what you just said, John, leads us nicely into this situation. Because not only did the days preceding this game have Burrow talking about things, and that got spun into all kinds of different, Carson Palmer, and is he going to do an Andrew Luck and all this kind of stuff. There's some rationale behind those things. Some people still hang on to their hatred of Carson Palmer for the reasons that they have. To me personally, I see just, again, things happening in a very similar way to 15 years ago. Palmer himself at that point, I don't know. I think a lot of people forget about this. He had a torn knee. He had a thumb problem. Remember in the preseason, I can't remember if it was 09 or 10, he got hit in the nose and kind of had like a partially broken nose and was bloody. He was getting beat up. And, at some point, these guys look at things, and if they're not turning the corner, they get upset. These are guys who've been winners their whole life, and when they're not winning and they're not seeing certain things being done, they're going to ask. I mean, if you're a business owner and you have a star employee, and the star employee is telling you things that they are encountering that prohibits them from doing their job to the best capacity, and you just kind of you just shake it off. I don't know. I don't know that that's happening, but that's the perception that is out there, right? And so now you've got former player Zach Moss, who was with this team for a blink of an eye, and granted, that poor guy broke 3 bones in his neck. He's shouting off on X saying, worst organization in sports. Torrey Smith, I saw also, he's got some Ravens ties though, so I get that. But Torrey Smith started saying, bad organization. Gosh, you got the snowy seats. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on how the logistics work out on that. We don't get that out here and all of that, but you have a Hamilton County commissioner supposedly, chastising the Bengals publicly about them not doing the bare minimum. Andrew Fox Miller of James Rapine's team that do excellent work. He had a film where only like one of the gates was open, I guess, yesterday. And like a few minutes before kickoff, there's a slew of people standing outside. By the way, it's frigid out there. And it's just, again, the lack of doing the small things, the lack of doing the right things. If you don't do the small things right, how are you going to do the big things to the best of your ability? And it's easy to pile on the Bengals right now at 4-10, another double-digit loss season, all of that. But again, you go back to the history, John, and they have to suck into getting generational talents essentially, and then they have a handful of nice years because they had high picks and they landed some nice players, and then as that. Free agency attrition and all that kind of stuff that inevitably happens, as that occurs, they don't know how to sustain success. And it seems so ridiculous to me in some way. Again, I'm from California, so I don't really understand too much of snow culture and all that kind of stuff, but it seems petty in a way to chastise it, but that is a bare minimum thing. I don't know how the logistics go on that with the icy seats, all that, but I don't know. Just do the right things. Do the right things. Do the small things.
What if they don't want to?
That,
like, I mean, I don't like. I'm not. What if they're just? There are bad people in the world, man. Like there are bad people with obviously with malicious intent, but there are just people who don't care. There are people who don't care, and that makes them not good. I'm not saying this completely correctly because now some emotions are taking over, but like people beg the Bengals to just do the things that a normal franchise in the NFL does. And if they continue to not do it for 3 decades, at one point, do you just consider that they just don't want to? Because you can't cry poor about not being able to just clear snow off of seats after it snowed. After it stopped snowing, by the way, 18 hours before kickoff. I was here in Cincinnati. It snowed from about 1 p.m. to 7, maybe a little bit after that. It did not snow
on Saturday.
It did not
right?
snow in the morning.
Yeah.
You have the money to hire workers to clear off snow and ice for people who chose to sit down in 1 degree temperatures, negative degree wind chill, to watch that sorry ass football team score 0 points. You have the capability of doing that. And if you don't, that speaks more about you than any other things that you can cry, oh, the NFL's unfair. We don't have money. You are who you are. And the Bengals at this point, what am I to say to make me believe that they actually care? I don't think the evidence is there. And I bring all this up because Zach Moss is far from the first person to say something to this degree, to call the Bengals a clown show, to say that they're at the bottom of the barrel. I think it should hurt now more than it did maybe at any other point in the team's history. They have one of the most popular athletes in the country leading
on the
them
planet, yeah,
with serious preseason expectations for the last 4 years of being something. They were in a Super Bowl 4 years ago, and this will not happen next year. They will not have preseason expectations of going to the playoffs. But when you have those expectations set upon you with that guy leading your team, and this is still being said about you, it should sting to your freaking core. It should hurt your heart that people still believe this about you. And if you don't do anything to change their mind, then you are who you are. And you can't be petty and you can't be upset when people call you out for your incompetence. This is who the Bengals are. At this point, I don't believe anything else. I just don't, because the evidence is just too piling up for me.
Well, and the apathy thing that I talked about, that if players perceive that about ownership, that they don't care, how do you think their performance is going to be on the field, right? I mean, it's a trickle down thing. And look, I you had a lot of people say, rightfully so, the counter arguments. They paid Chase and Higgins, and to some degree Trey Hendrickson this year. They finally got the indoor facility that everybody. That's fine, but that's stuff that should have been bare minimum stuff. I mean, that is not necessarily huge contracts to 2 wide receivers, but indoor practice facility for where your team is located, all that is bare minimum stuff. And when this stuff, I love what you said about this should sting to your core when this stuff. Instead, what I am assuming what will happen this offseason on those rare occasions that we get public appearances from the Brown family, Duke Tobin, all of these criticisms that are maybe politely by the media or whatever presented to them, they will have excuses. They will explain away these situations. They will deflect and say, well, look what we did this offseason. We spent all this money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I, like you, would like to see honesty and accountability. You're right. We messed up here. You're right. We didn't do enough. Instead, I expect, because this is what I have seen over so many years, excuse away those things, shove away those. That's not, that's not a legitimate gripe. It just, again, it just stings that this is the perception out there. And I think those criticisms, all that stuff, when you're winning, people just kind of, okay, well, whatever. But when you lose and there's all these different things that come to light, they get brought to the forefront. And we'll talk about what's next for this team, what they may need to think about doing this offseason and everything. But the first step in this, to me, is accountability, a hard look in the mirror, and not excuse away these criticisms, however valid or not they think that they are.
You know what I still think about sometimes? Like when they paid Chase and Higgins in March, they put together this whole compilation of like basically pulling receipts from talking heads saying that they weren't capable of doing this, that there's no way they're going to pay all these guys all this money. And they made a whole funny video about it. They cherish being petty, especially at institutions that have taken their turns at ripping them a new one for very justifiable things. They love getting the upper hand, be like, haha, we did this, you're wrong. But they don't do enough. They don't care enough to do the things that actually do matter in terms of instilling what should be a quality franchise and a quality organization. It's something that means something a little bit more than just making a buck and cashing a shared revenue check from the NFL. Like, I hate when the Bengals showcase their pettiness, because they don't earn that. They don't deserve it. They don't deserve the right to be petty because they have so much more to do. We've celebrated them over the last 5 years for the incremental pieces of progress that they've made.
We sure have.
With a bubble, with just names on a banner for the Ring of Honor. Like, there's so much more that they need to do before they can even think about being petty again for something like this.
And Brookster Rob, I think we've seen them in here on occasion. When we go to the playoffs next year, I'll be wanting some regrets for how much you are all trashing the Bengals. I would love nothing more than to sit here and say, I was wrong. They did this. They did. I'm not being sarcastic. I am being sincere. I would love nothing more than to sit here and eat crow. Obviously, a apropos reference here, Ravens week, but I would love nothing more than that. But like you said, we have applauded them a number of times for Ring of Honor, the bubble, all kinds of, a little bit more fan engagement. Elizabeth Blackburn has admirably, stepped into that role very, very well. But this now, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. There are perceptions out there, and I think a lot of Bengals fans, they just go, la la la, you're living in the 90s, la 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 la. And some of that is true, but sometimes you need an outside voice or outside critic to come in and say your business model is not
bar rescue. We need NFL rescue. We need bar rescue.
Where's John Tapper? Where is John Tapper?
Where's John Tapper?
Where is John Tapper when we need him? Anyway, I don't like doing this Bengals bash session and all that kind of stuff. But again, when you witness, you and I have watched decades of this team, and you and I have covered all kinds of different scenarios, positive and negative, about this team. And again, when you are wasting away generational talents, and I can't even believe, if you were to tell me in 2022 at the conclusion of that season that the Bengals, after those two back-to-back seasons, they would not make the playoffs for the next 3 years, I would have thought you were nuts. I would have, and here we are. Here we are. It is not good enough. It's just not good enough. So if you want to blame the players, okay. If you want to blame ownership, okay. It's just not good enough.
Dude, at the end of the day, we didn't do anything. We're talking about things that happened that they did and didn't do. Like, it wasn't us who left the snow on the seats. It wasn't us who didn't open the gates until like 30 minutes before the game started. It wasn't us who did those things. It wasn't us who tweeted out that this is the worst franchise in sports. It keeps happening. They keep providing evidence for why these things keep happening. And it's just at some point you just need to accept the fact that they will keep happening because this is who they are, or they need to be called out and forced to change. One of the two things is going to happen. And right now, again, I'm kind of veering towards the first one.
And by the way, when they got some public pressure, that's when you saw those incremental improvements being made. Ring of Honor, that was a longtime fan issue that they took with the team. And, the indoor practice facility, I can go back, I don't even know how long about that, but we could go on and on with this. Obviously, it's just not good enough. There are some people that still want to, and I get it. I want to stay positive. Well, yeah, I want to stay positive too. I like to think I'm a relatively positive person, but when results aren't there and you think your way is the best way and it clearly is not, we're going to talk about it. I mean, that's what this show does. We talk about all kinds of stuff with the Cincinnati Bengals. And by the way, if you are new here, this is the Orange Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel and the Believe podcast network. We are presented by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and FOCO, the fans only company. John, I didn't do my good enough on my pre-production. Where are we at with the line on this one coming up here? This was a game that was already flexed out of Sunday Night Football, right? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, so the Dolphins are playing, as of this recording, they are playing in about an hour against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but there is already a line set for next week, and I believe the Bengals opened up as 1.5-point underdogs, and that remains to be the line here on Monday night. Over and under 50.5, with 1.5 being the spread towards the home team. The Dolphins have kind of been surging in the past month or so. The run game is kind of back to where they were expected to be with Mike McDaniel coordinating the offense as the head coach. So yeah, it's not looking like exactly the kind of game that you would have expected all the way back in September, but the Dolphins, at least, are on the up and up, and they'll probably make me look like an idiot if they lose to the Steelers tonight.
Well, go to America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Place your bets there. And if you want to get some last-minute gifts for the Bengal fan in your life that it has exclusive merchandise, go to FOCO and check out the links in the show descriptions there. We appreciate their partnerships. We appreciate all of you tuning in, making your comments known, whether you agree with us or not. That's okay. That's what this is about. But we're talking about all kinds of stuff, and now we're going to talk about what's next. And, of course, a biggie from Mr. Generosity, Mr. Whisper. Gents, this is This will probably be my last post until draft time, but I'll leave you both with this question. What is your prediction what the offseason will look like? Will they make moves or will they run it back? The only reason we let this simmer for so long is because we were ending with this kind of segment. Mr. Whisper, I don't know if you're in Cincy, but or where you're located, but if we can link up for a game, I'll take you out to dinner or something. You keep supporting this show unlike anybody else, and we just continue to appreciate you for that. But of course, with that, if now the negative PR, what we watched on Sunday begs a couple of questions. Is this? I guess the salvageable, is it salvageable? Is more about, is it salvageable if the status quo remains? If there's not a head coaching change, if there's not operational changes, if there aren't additional, whatever, scouts and resources poured into this team, free agency, all of that, whatever you can think of, it's more, if this is more run it back, which they will to some degree. They just, over the last couple of off seasons, they've paid their offensive stars, so they're going to run it back to some degree. It's more just about coaching staff. What do you do on defense? How are you going to bolster the unit elsewhere? So I guess the salvageable question, part of the question, is more about if they run it back with Zach Taylor at the helm and, kind of keeping things status quo more or less. I don't think it is. Now, if they really do a hard look in the mirror and they maybe reassess some of the ways that they run their business, maybe that appeases Burrow and the rest of the team, and you got a reinvigorated team.
I don't. I'm struggling with words, even though I've put together some of these words earlier. But I was thinking about this during the game. What is the message in 2026 if nothing serious happens in terms of change? Like last year, the message was, oh, the offense is great and the defense just needs someone new to look after it and someone new to develop the young players.
Nope.
The message before that in 2023, oh, Burrow got hurt. He missed almost half the year and there was progress being made before, that happened after he recovered from the calf. What is the message this year? Because they stunk. They were flawed with Burrow healthy before his toe got hurt, despite the fact that they were 2-0. They were flawed when he was out, and obviously Flacco and Browning took over. They're flawed now that he's back. I think the fact that Burrow came back and didn't just quit on the year, it almost kind of helps the Bengals, opens their eyes to the fact that this isn't about Burrow missing half the year as to why the season went down the drain. The team is just bad in general. And the team is bad because the people who put together the team are bad, and the people who are coaching the team are bad. And the players, at the end of the day, most of the players, aside from a handful of core players, are mostly just not good enough. What is the message in terms of we just need to run it back and just hope for better luck? Because I don't know what the best possible scenario for this season would be if everything went right. Do they just sneak into the playoffs? This team is not division winning in a normal year. The AFC North win in terms of the winner has more than just maybe 9 wins. It's just not that's just not them. And I think for us to expect that this past offseason was probably ludicrous on our part. If they don't have a coaching change, if they don't have, like you said, an operational change, if we don't have someone new looking over and doing the job that Duke Tobin has been tasked of doing and is now failing to do, at least in the last handful of years, what is the message in terms of why 2026 would be any different than this year, other than some players staying healthy? Does that get you just a couple more wins? So you're a 7 or 8 win team instead of a potentially 5 or 6 win? I don't know how this could possibly be salvageable without at least one new person, either as the coach or as the fake general manager in this case. I just don't know what the message could possibly be as to how they can be any better.
I've said this a couple of times, and I had some fun with Dale Altman of Bengals and Brews, as well as Jeff Treniple of Strawberry Ice last Friday. There are a couple things I want to bring to light. Number one, when you talk about the fake GM, I think we all know you're hinting at Duke Tobin. Duke Tobin took over this role, this director of player personnel or something like it, in 1999. He, and I'd have to look at the timeline as specifically as to when he was hired, but I'm assuming it was ahead of the draft. So you have to figure that he was involved in some way, somehow, in the Bengals' decision to say no to the Saints' mega trade deal in the draft for the number 3 pick that they were giving up basically their entire draft. So the Bengals just said no and decided to draft Akili Smith. That in itself, if you were to go back, a couple of years or a couple of years after you drafted Akili Smith, that in itself is a pretty fireable offense, whether that was Mike Brown making that ultimate call or whomever, and you wanted to use someone as a scapegoat. The other thing that I want to bring up, because you mentioned, any other year when you have a normally 11, 12 win Baltimore team, another 10 win Pittsburgh team, that sort of thing. The Bengals, as they are right now, they would not have fared as well as they did, most likely, in the division. There existed a scenario, John, wherein the Bengals could have been 5-1 in the division and still not made the playoffs. I don't know. Take that for what you will, but that is staggering, and that to me just screams missed opportunity this year. It screams it. So in terms of where I've said this a bunch of times. I don't like to be the guy that fire this guy, fire this person. I don't like that, because we're talking about people's livelihoods and all of the things that come with that. You and I have done this show long enough where we've had this round and round conversation about Marvin Lewis towards the end of his tenure. At some point, though, like, to me, if this was a 24-20 just close loss and, oh man, the Bengals just had it, they just don't have enough right now. They're fighting, they're grinding. I might have a little bit of a different mindset. It's not, to me, like fire Zach Taylor. It's just sometimes you need just the Bengals have been more, I would argue they've been more patient with Zach Taylor than probably a lot of other teams would have been.
Yes.
I mean, you could look at Dan Quinn in the Atlanta Falcons in his time there. I mean, that was a pretty short leash after they lost that Super Bowl, and in epic fashion, mind you, but that was a pretty short leash there. It's not so much about, I don't think Zach is a good coach. I don't think he's a good offensive mind or anything like that. I just looked at the body language, the lack of effort, it seemed, from a lot of players, and or a bad mindset from the players on the field the other day. And it's like, you just gotta. And the other thing with that, it's, again, Zach has set himself up this season to be out of scapegoats. As you mentioned, the offseason plan wasn't so much about let's get some really good outside free agent additions, that sort of thing. It has been, I'm making staff changes wholesale. Well, now you see Lou Anarumo having, a form of success with a Colts team that trotted out Phillip freaking Rivers last Sunday. And
we're a Colts podcast right now.
I'd be having a hell of a time. But no, at this point, unfortunately, if you are a Zach person, if you are pro Zach, and I like Zach Taylor, I just see this thing going in a direction where it just needs a reset button based on what I watched on the field Sunday.
Reset is a great word to use here, because we are not exactly at the 2010-2011 inflection point with Marvin Lewis. We're like a year off in terms of how long Marvin was the head coach at that time, how long Zach has been the head coach here. But if this isn't salvageable, then the question is what is needed, right? And what the Bengals determined what was needed in 2011 is to keep Marvin Lewis as head coach, because they believed that he was still the best head coach for what they wanted to do as a football team. But they obviously reset the main parts of the roster. It was a completely new team in 2011. It was led by a new quarterback in Andy Dalton, led by a new star wide receiver in AJ Green. That was the next era of Bengals football. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins are going to be paid $289 million over the next 3 years. They are not going anywhere. That is your core. The reset is around them.
Yep.
And Like, again, there's not going to be an Andy Dalton, AJ Green walking through that door with Zach Taylor still as the head coach. If there is to be a reset to be had, I just don't see how it's not the coach instead of like the main players, because obviously there's going to be parts of the roster that have to look different next year, particularly on defense. But that just can't be what the reset is. If this past reset on defense on the coaching side of the ball, if that clearly wasn't enough and it didn't happen enough, the progress was made quick enough in the season for it to actually matter. If there is to be a reset to be had and it is needed, I just don't know how it doesn't start with the head coach. And again, for like, I've defended Zach a lot over the years as well. I don't think that he's as terrible or as incompetent as some people like to say, because he's working with this organization. If there could be anything that needs to happen, obviously it has to start at the very, very top of the organization. But if that's not going to change, then you need a head coach who can deal with the limitations that he's been given, and you need, again, a fake GM who has to deal with the limitations that he's given. And if Duke and Zach are not the guys that give them the best chance to win under these circumstances, that's where the reset needs to happen. Mainly, obviously, again, players need to come and go here and there, but the main part of this reset has to be at those two positions.
And I think you said that's the caveat for me. If the Bengals are going to keep Zach Taylor, because we've talked about this too, if you're not going to change certain things up here that position your coach, your quarterback, your players for the highest amount of success, if you're not going to change certain practices up here, you could keep running coaches out of town. Zach Taylor could, if he were to leave the Bengals this offseason, he could very well go to a well-run franchise, probably reestablish himself initially as a quality offensive coordinator in this league, and then potentially go to another well-run team as a head coach, as one of the new bright young minds, and have, success elsewhere, because certain systems are in place, certain elements of the team are dialed in that are not dialed in with the Bengals. And I wouldn't be surprised if that career arc happened for him. So we could talk again. That's been my point of contention, where people are like, fire Zach. You could run all these coaches out of town, but if you're not, if your systems aren't in place as an operation to have everyone be able to do their job at the highest level possible, then what are you doing? You're gonna hope that you sucker luck into generational talents. You're gonna hope that you find someone out there that is a wonderkind, essentially, as a head coach. You're gonna hope to find the next Sean McVay, because everything with this team, their margin of error, whether it's Joe Burrow playing quarterback, whether it's how they draft and their hit rate, their needed hit rate on draft picks, their needed hit rate on free agents acquisitions, their margin of error is slim, much slimmer than most, if not any other team out there. And until the team can admit that, and until that comes to light, I think you're going to have more of this chasing your tail. It's the same cycle we've seen, John. They suck for a number of years. They finally hit a lottery ticket of a quarterback that takes them to places. You can complain about Carson Palmer all you want. Carson Palmer took them to a place that team had not seen in 15 years. 15 years. And so, and what happens? They have this little blip of success for a couple of years, depending on your definition of success. And then they fall into the doldrums. They're a middling team that starts to go way, way down because they've let certain elements of their football team erode. They hang on to players too long. They hang on to coaches too long. And then, of course, their operations are not set up in a way to have sustaining, long-lasting success. So to me, that I think you bring up a good point. I think Zach stays. I'm cool if Zach stays, if there are some immediate big-time organizational changes above his head that helps him do his job better.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to sell me on Zach staying at this point, regardless.
Me too. Yeah.
At some point, you just kind of realize that if something's just not working, then it's just better off for both parties to kind of move on. And again, I don't know. I truly don't know if they feel this way. What I do know is that if the Bengals lose these next 3 games, which Who knows if they will, right? Like at this point, I think everything's on the table, right? Zach Taylor is 17-15 in the last 3 years of Joe Burrow as quarterback. He was 29, 19, and 1, including the playoffs from 2020 to 2022. So, in all likelihood, he's going to be about a 500 coach with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL over these last 3 years. Like you said, coming off of 2022 when they were in the AFC Championship game, how is that acceptable? It's just not. Like, regardless of the imperfections of the side of the ball that he doesn't call the plays for, even though he's still responsible for that as the head coach, regardless of a lot of the problems that the organization has in terms of the offseason, 500 with Joe Burrow, that's the best you can do, man. Like, it's just not good enough, man. It's not good enough. It's obviously not good enough from the fake GM perspective. It's not been good enough from the head coaching perspective either. Like, it's the whole mantra of, even when things are actually going well, it does an organization well to instill change after a certain period of time, just so things don't get stale. Things are stale right now, man. It's stale bread right now.
It is. And real quick, just a side note before we start to get on out of here, I know you thankfully reminded me when we were talking before we took the air that on Monday, Zach noted that Joe Burrow, his plans are to have Joe Burrow play and start the remaining games on the calendar this year, as well as there was a noticeable limp, I guess, of some kind, or a slight limp, slight sort of something with Joe Burrow on that, what I believe is the injured toe, or the reconstructed toe that he did. So I don't know. I don't know if that's good, bad, and different, but it is what it is.
Yeah. And I want to shout out to Greg Rosenthal, who provided that stat in terms of Zach's record with Burrow. It's kind of the reason, like, why I think it matters that Zach has decided that Burrow is going to play for the rest of the season. Obviously, Burrow is very much aligned with that. Like, he wants to be out there. There's no reason why he would push to come back, and came back as early as he did without playing as many games as possible. He's sick of watching games, and especially when he can play, he's going to play. And Zach needs him out there because, like, they just need to look the very best version of themselves in order for him to keep his job. Zach, in this case, in order for maybe Duke to keep his job. This organization, amongst their many flaws, is going to look at every single piece of evidence as to why they should or shouldn't fire someone, or should or should not keep someone. And in this case, if they finish with 3 quality games against the Miami Dolphins and the lowly Arizona Cardinals and Cleveland Browns, that could have a deciding factor in what happens this offseason. So it's entirely in Zach's interest, in his best interest, to put his quarterback one out there, even if they're out of the contention for the playoffs. Like, he needs as many wins as possible. Everyone in that building needs to win as much as possible.
Yep. We're going to drop the mic and get out of here. We've said a lot. I hope, a lot of people, obviously some of it is divisive in terms of, thoughts, or, playing the blame game, that sort of thing. I do want to shout out Ben Riley, who gave us a couple of super chats. One I wasn't real comfortable with sharing because it was kind of a little bit of I don't know. There was a Zach Taylor bedroom reference there. I wasn't fully comfortable sharing that one, but I still appreciate, we appreciate the support there, Ben. Appreciate that. And at any rate, that's, I don't have too much else. I think we've kind of, given a lot of thoughts on how we feel about the state of the Bengals right now, and it is not good. But what do you have for us, John, on our way out the door?
Unfortunately, not a lot of the comments in our comment section are particularly humorous. I think a lot of people are just venting and arguing with each other, which is par for the course with what's going on right now. So my drop will be, in a week in which people have opined and speculated whether or not a Cincinnati quarterback wants to be out of Cincinnati. That actually ended up being the case on Monday when Brendan Sorsby entered the transfer portal from the University of Cincinnati. So my salute to, arguably, I think, a even better quarterback than the guy that he was a part of taking over for when Desmond Ridder left, and one of the best quarterbacks in recent memory for the Bearcats, who definitely deserves a lot better than the quality and the state of the Bearcats football program. So shout out to Brendan Sorsby. Whether you get drafted, whether you go to a better program that's going to pay you a little bit more in your final season of college, I salute to you and what you did over the last 2 years for Cincinnati.
Former Cincinnati Bengal Desmond Ridder. right?
Mm-hmm.
Former.
Yep.
All right, we're going to get out of here. Thanks everybody for tuning in, whether it's live or after the fact. We appreciate you. Also want to give a shout out to T. Higgins. We were trying. He did have an event at the Boys and Girls Club, I believe, in Kentucky, giving out some holiday gifts to a bunch of different kids. We were actually invited to go. Unfortunately, just couldn't get there in person. We appreciate the invitation. We appreciate what T. Higgins did. So want to give him, anytime there's some great charitable work being done by the Bengals and their players, we want to give that a salute as well. So appreciate T. Higgins. We were going to try and get a couple minutes with him, but obviously just in person and all that kind of stuff, some dynamics prohibited that, but still want to give him a shout out for doing some good work there in the community, despite a bad Bengals season. John, you're the man, buddy. I appreciate you. I appreciate your passion, and hope I assume our listeners do as well, but appreciate you. And we will speak to all of you soon. Go check out FanDuel, get your bets in where applicable, and of course do so responsibly. America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, and of course get some last-minute gifts at the fans only company, FOCO. Both of those links are in the show description. Check that out, and we will be back with more on the Orange and Black Insider. John, take care, buddy.
Peace.